Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. This one's from Afroformed in response to how to set up the sync function on the Roland MX-1, a video I did in November 2019. And Afro writes, I know the USB says area only, but will other hardware with USB be all good if you don't have 4 area units? Seems a shame to waste a USB input. Your videos are really helpful, man. You've got me out of some rut loads of times. Oh, sorry, a rut loads of times. Rub. I can't read what I'm written on the page. Really appreciate it. Well, first of all, thank you for the feedback. That's what the videos are there to try and help. Anyway, the big problem with Roland Area and Boutique is the fact, and a number of other items in the stable, should I say, is the fact that the equipment is non-class compliant. By this I mean you have to download a driver on the computer to make it work properly. Roland introduced support via firmware updates to the MX-1 to allow these things to run or be recognised by the MX-1 and either do a pass-through or actually work with the MX-1 mixing facilities. It is possible for some non-area equipment to work on with the MX-1, but as a pass-in information to your computer via USB, less chance you can get the equipment actually worked with the MX-1. And this is a big problem for the sort of kind of MX-1, is really it will just work with Roland equipment. It won't work with much other equipment. So Levi, that's where we are. Roland haven't released anything new on this front for a while. In fact, they haven't actually released a firmware update for the MX-1 for quite a while. So I think the MX-1 is probably sitting there quietly withering to die. Unfortunately, because I think the MX-1 was a really good idea. I just don't think Roland's execution of the MX-1 was particularly brilliant. Take one. This next one comes from a long-term commentator, Sean Curran. In review of the my overview of the Core Poly 61 Part 1, a video I did in November 2021. And Sean writes, back in the late 80s, my bandmate had a Poly 6 and I loved the sound and arpeggiator. I had the opportunity to purchase a Poly 61M. So the M is the MIDI version, okay? So Poly 61, no MIDI, although you could have it retrofitted, Poly 61M with MIDI, which works better than our MIDI sequencers. However, I never got over the lack of knobs and passed on purchasing the 61. Sorry, he had an opportunity to purchase the 61 and he passed. Now, what's really interesting about this is that, it was really interesting for is the Poly 6 and the Poly 61N. You see in another comment from another tuber that it feels I didn't do a good enough job on this video, which I admit was rushed due to the synth being sold by the owner much quicker than he thought it was going to be sold, so I ended up having to do a very, very quick job on the synthesizer without doing enough research and familiarization. Now, I know that Poly 61 incorporated MIDI into the synth design as opposed to the aftermarket modification that was fitted to the Poly 61 that was loaned to me. I did try and understand the MIDI implementation of the synth and just couldn't figure it out at the time I had the synth. It was basic was probably a very understatement of how MIDI was implemented. I couldn't get it to register notes. I plugged my A110 into it so I could see what it was transmitting, and to be honest, I didn't think it was transmitting anything because the A110 wasn't registering anything on any channel, and I couldn't work out how to, in the settings, how to actually get it to either switch the MIDI on because it was switched off or do something else. So it was a bit confuddling actually, but it could be that it just wasn't working. But I'm sure there was some aftermarket instructions, you know, press this, do that. But again, my limited time of searching on the internet for this particular machine, I couldn't find, apart from the user manual, the basic user manual, I found very little instruction stuff about the Poly 61. Now, I'm sure it exists, and I'm sure I could have ferreted it out had I sort of had time to spend a few hours, well, more than a few hours, searching with different phrases to see if I could get some sort of hits. But my time with this synth was limited, and normally with a synth, I have to be honest and say I can normally get a feel for the synth quite quickly. But I just did not gel with this synth at all. And looking back on the footage, I do feel that this really comes across that I didn't gel with the synth. I'm not sure how to explain this. I used the Poly 6 engine on the Kronos and expecting, I suppose, something similar from a kind of hardware version of this, and I didn't get that. I didn't get the same experience that I get on my Korg Kronos to the Korg Poly 61. The kind of experience I was expecting to get. So that was the thing. What was interesting though was when I returned the synth to the owner, I obviously talked about my limited playing time with Richard, who owned the synth, and what my feelings were. The funniest thing was he turned around to me and echoed exactly the same sentiments, which was the reason why he was selling it. He always wanted the Korg Poly 61. He got it, couldn't get on with it, and ended up sort of turning around and saying, "Yeah, I'm just going to knock this onto somebody who can use it." Now, others will probably say they had very different experiences from this synth, especially if you owned this synth and had it for a long period of time. My research and shooting to shoot the videos wasn't enough, and I get that. But the other thing is, and what I found was many of you were describing a synthesizer with a tonal quality that I just wasn't hearing. Now, that could have been down to a number of reasons. There could have been something wrong with the synth. The internal settings of the synth could have been changed that I wasn't getting on with it. As a previous commentator said, you know, while I was doing the filming, the synth was in mono mode. Right? Maybe that's my misunderstanding, because I thought I'd put it into poly mode. But there are a whole raft of things, and it comes down to one thing: not enough time to do the research and put the time in. So as I said, I need about 4 weeks with the synth really to be able to get under the bonnet, do enough research to actually be able to present the synth on the channel. And I'm not gonna fall into that trap again. This was a kind of one-off instance. I thought I was going to get enough time. Unfortunately, I didn't.